I'm Carrie, and thanks so much to the Society for inviting me to come and speak. This has been a dream of mine since I started to stand before you all and talk about cool things, because I get to see all of you guys do it at every conference. Everyone in this room, I think, has played a role in me fulfilling this dream today. And that's the great thing that I love about this society. The people in this room are like a family. And Elizabeth and I were talking about this yesterday. When you come and people accept you and you give hugs, it's like you haven't seen them in a year, but it was like you just saw them last weekend. And you share information and ideas generously. And I have so many mentors in this room outside of my undergraduate mentor, Penny Packer, and my graduate mentor, Kimberly Behrens. But then there's so many of you who have played an amazing role in my education and learning that I just want to say thank you. And coming to the Precision Teaching Conference every year is really fun because we get to come and see all these pretty shiny data. We see CBM data, so again, it's just like no intervention. We see JAWS, increasing accelerations across corrects, decreasing accelerations across errors. We see the same thing when we're probing it out on different CBM data. We can look at direct instruction data and look at a crossover learning picture if it ever pops up. And it's telling me it doesn't want to. There we go. We can see rapid acquisition throughout various slices of curriculum. We can even see problem behavior decrease over time to unobservable events. We can watch really cool videos of kids going through complex skills, and these are kind of actually simple skills I'm going to show you, but they're really fast and probably better than any of us can do in the room. Okay.
4, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, 32, 36, 40, 44, 48, 4, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, 32, 36, 40, 44, 48. 4, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, 32, 36, 40, 44, 48. 4, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, 32, 36, 40, 44, 48.
Nice job. John, this is the video clip I wanted to show you yesterday.
Okay. Yes, you're gonna say the rules why the letters are capitalized. Okay? Yeah, you wanna watch her? Come here.
We should just like sing that like this.
Okay.
Okay. Mars is the planet. Mom and Dad are two people. To Kill a Mockingbird is the name of a book. German is a nationality. Girl Scout is a group of girls. Labor Day is a holiday. Minecraft is a game. Frozen is a movie. It's the end of yours. The end of a letter. November is a month, and Friday is a day. ATM and ASAP are acronyms. Disney World is a theme park. Orlando, Florida is a city. French is a language. Spain is a country. Dear is the beginning of a letter. Dr. Carey is a title. It's the beginning of a sentence. I should always be capital in a sentence. Northeast is a region. CJ is the what's it called? Initials. And Peggy and Peg should be capital because it's the initial. It's her nickname and her name.
There you go. Or a little girl with ASD who's just learning categories for the first time taking. Oh, I got it. Ready, set, go. It was Halloween. And so after the Precision Teaching Conference, you go home, you saw all those shiny, beautiful, gorgeous data that are perfect. And you saw all those videos of fast, awesome learners who are responding accurately and really, more sophisticated stuff than I just showed you. And so you go home and you're Superwoman. You feel like you can conquer the world and you can do anything with this amazing technology, and you're going to change the face of education. But then, as you start to accomplish this, you run into barriers because kids don't come to you like they do in those videos. They don't come to you fluent. You may lack the extensive precision teaching that some of us were fortunate to receive, or the training that some of us were fortunate to receive. You may lack the precision teaching community in your area. You may lack curriculum, or when you learn to create curriculum, you're perseverating over whether it has enough precision, depth, and scope. And then, this is my world, I wonder if I'm not controlling for all the necessary variables to really accurately measure what I want to measure. And so the reality, when the kid walks into your room, is this. Okay, let's start right here. What sound does you make?
You.
Sounds I make. I, right here. He doesn't even know where to start on the page.
A.
Wait. Wait.
Was that 3 errors? Was that 1? That's like, right? Or it could be like this. A little girl knows her sight words from a flashcard deck that she learned in her classroom, but when she was reading my deck that I created for her, and the only thing that's different is I use blue Sharpie instead of black, and hers has dots and stickers and mine doesn't, she has no idea what the words are.
So, what word is this right here?
At. Not. Come. Up.
Good job. So, do you know what this card is? I want you to look at these 4 words and see which one is the same. Good job. So what word is that?
She had to lift it up.
Good. All right, I want you to put it down below so you can still see the top one. Okay. Do you know what word this is?
Came.
Not came. It's...
But I had it.
And then you're like, wait a minute, this is not what I signed up for. This is not what they told me at the precision teaching conference. I'm not sure what to do. And so you try doing the little things, but then you feel like this cat running around in circles chasing her tail. And then finally you get to the point where you're just like, I can't. I don't even know what I'm doing. And your chart looks like this. So I like to reintroduce myself. My name is Carrie, and I have barriers. Because those barriers that I mentioned are stuff that I interact with as well. And so this talk today is not necessarily me preaching to you, it's me preaching to myself. So, those of you have journaled, and I find this to be a valuable thing. It's something that I would like to include in my life. But, so I had a few journals, and one of them was given to me by my dear friend Kendra for my wedding journal. And so the one journal that I've written in the most was when I lived in Spain for a summer. This is about as far as I got in it. And the dates are about a month and a half, but if you look right here, it says, well, this is what I get for not journaling for 2 weeks. So it's really not a month and a half that I was able to journal. When my firstborn was born, when Squish was born, a friend of mine suggested journaling, having a journal for each child for every year. And knowing my issues with not being consistent with journaling, I was like, well, maybe I'll just do one journal for their whole life. And so, Squish is almost 6, and I've gotten through 5 pages. That was actually written before she was born. This is Dachi, is my second. And poor Micah doesn't have a journal. Because let's just be realistic, right? And I can see you guys saying, well, journaling isn't charting, and I get that, I do. But a little bit of history of my upbringing is that my first behavior analytic classes, they were taken in the same semester. One was Hank Pennypacker's class, and the other was EAB with Timothy Hackenberg. So the graphs, the charts that I was exposed to were the standard acceleration charts and the cumulative records. So that's why I thought how you evaluated data in behavior analysis. I didn't open a Java article until I got to grad school. And so I was born into the society before I knew what the society was. And so I am more likely to reach for a chart than I am for a journal, obviously. And I use this, I reach for a chart when I have problems and issues with my clients. If I have a question, let's put it on a chart. Let's see what we're measuring. But I don't do it with myself. When I have personal issues occurring, I don't reach for a chart. I sit and like stew on it and try to evaluate variables with no data. And the same thing with my kids. I mean, as a parent, you guys we could put like millions of charts about our own kids, right? They're not perfect. Micah, my baby, she clings to me. It's like she's trying to get back into the uterus. Dachi, he lacks food variety. We actually have an intervention on this that we sometimes do, depending on what time we eat dinner. And Swish cries when she brushes her hair. Her intervention was to chop it off. Me personally, I've been suffering from self-diagnosed insomnia about 1 or 2 nights a week. I only sleep 3 hours. And I recognize the need to chart. You know, my dear friend and I had a conversation about this. And, but then I get all up in my head about, well, what do I chart? Do I chart the duration of total sleep? I wake up multiple times in the night. Do I chart each stacked durations of each little sleep? Do I mark the X's of each wake up? What if I wake up to pee and I'm able to go back to sleep in 5 minutes? Is that really an error? Do I mark that as an error? So do you see how I'm the kitty cat chasing her tail right now, right? And so this is my insomnia chart. I can learn a lot about myself with this, right? But at least I started taking data on an app, which is like all I do is set it next to me in bed, so it's like the lowest response ever possible. But at least I can go back and track something whenever I figure what the hell I'm going to put on my chart. And so I'm thinking about, what about those people who are not born into the society like I was? Maybe they are not reaching for the chart as I'm not reaching for my journal. Sometimes it's just easier just to do what you're doing, live the life that you live. Keep on sticking to discrete trials. Keep on sticking to Excel graphs. Keep on sticking to some sort of app that you're just pressing a button on and it charts, or not charts for you, but it doesn't have a graph, right? And it just puts it on a table. So they're not reaching for the chart because they're contacting these barriers, and these barriers are preventing them from even dropping a dot. And so I need to learn more act stuff. I'm taking a workshop in the spring. But one thing that I do know is you gotta sit with it, right? You gotta sit with these barriers. You gotta be, like, it's right there next to you and you're like, hey, what's going on, barrier? Nice to meet you. Thanks for living there. Because if not, then like you're escaping and avoiding and behavior, right? It's not good. So your chart looks like that. And you need to be okay with looking at some ugly data. These are dirty data. This is a snowplow. This is an ugly learning picture. It's an application check. The application wasn't working. You can look at like a downhill. You can look at high variability. You need to be, and all of a sudden problem behavior starts resurfacing, right? And all of these tell a story, and I can explain them all, about saying, oh, we were testing out a new program, there was instructor variability, or this parent wasn't consistent with delivering the behavioral intervention at home, or one kid was chronically ill and all of that stuff showed up in his frequencies, or there was just plain lack of application. And so the reality of it is when you are living your life using the chart, you may see some worsening pictures. You may see some dirty data. You may not know the perfect intervention. You may think you do, and I'm saying this because I've lived it. I'm like, damn, this is going to be good. And what does the chart show me? It was terrible. It was the worst decision that I could have made for that child. And so there's kinks that you have to work out. I went to NABA a few weeks ago, and in the ladies' room, there was, they have automatic faucets. You know, it's a swanky newish hotel, and automatic faucets, you put your hand underneath, you know, so the water's supposed to come out. Well, there was a bright yellow Post-it note in front of each faucet head that said, turn the knob. Now at NABA, it's Reno. Even the students are freaking smart at Reno, right? And so then now we had all of these, I'm not gonna name names, but we had invited presenters who are geniuses in our field doing this, trying to get the water from the faucet. And so whoever put the Post-it note intervention was probably thinking, well, obviously this is going to work because you're going to see a bright yellow Post-it note, and this is obviously going to. And yet, brilliant people in our field, were not attending to that, right? So that intervention, while it makes sense, while we think that it would have been perfect, it actually didn't produce the results of behavior that it was intended. So, I invite you to come get dirty with me. And yes, this is me. And we're going to share some dirty laundry. So, I think it was maybe the first year that our center was open. And we were working on creating some higher level reading comprehension skills based out of the Reading Success SRA curriculum. And one of the things that they target in there is fact and opinion. And I'm like, this kid that we're working with needs fluency practice on this. And so I'm like, I have a PhD. I know the difference between a fact and an opinion. I will write this, thank you. And so one of the examples was Ethan's favorite color is green. And if anyone has ever met my husband, this is one of the first sentences that he says. I mean, it's with kids, it's like, hey, what's your name? What's your favorite color? Mine's green. And so how many of you would say that this is an opinion? Raise your hands. How many would you say it's a fact? Okay. Well, we had some inconsistency at our center on whether that was a fact or an opinion. And so we had some variable data there in this first phase because we were marking things like this inconsistently. And so while I wrote the curriculum and I'm like, this is badass, this is like the Post-it note, the data didn't show that. So then version 2, fine, I will, relinquish my authority and let's go online and check out facts and opinions that we can include on this sheet. And so it is illegal to drink if you are younger than 21. How might this get hairy? Can anyone just take a guess? Country, exactly, right? And so that relates some inconsistency with how we scored the child's response. So that's in this first panel here, and then the second panel, the other time chart. So finally, we cleaned up our stuff. We created a new sheet. We see, the green one is altered a little bit to be more obvious of an opinion. And let's look at the daily. We're blowing it up. Phase 1, increasing accelerations across the board, but high variable responding. We just see when you're sitting with the learner, and especially when you're talking to other instructors and there's inconsistency in how you're scoring it, it wasn't good curriculum. And then finally we got to a version that worked, and you see the difference, right? You see that tight, stable data, and then that's replicated across version 2. So my take-home point number 1 is make sure your training is on point and how you're scoring everything, right? Make sure everyone is knowing what is a correct, what is an error, and the nuances between corrects and errors when you get into more sophisticated curriculum like this. And a side note, when you create something, test it out, right? We have this scrum in the office, and we have new curriculum that's put in our testing phase that we try out with a learner. And once, again, you think that you're hot shit and what you created was amazing, but you put it in front of a learner, and that's the true test. So test it out before wide implementation with curriculum, with interventions, with changes in systems, stuff like that. Rachel was one of our top performers in reading. She flew through our reading curriculum, made the principals honor roll when she was threatened to be held back, and we worked with her over the summer. And this is before she went into the next grade. And we were working with her reading using some of Elizabeth's curriculum with the auditory phonemic awareness curriculum, where you're given 2 words and the learner is supposed to tell you what sound is missing from the second word. So play, pay, what's missing? Oh, thank you. So, blowing it up here, the first phase, we started with random starts of different words within each timing. And she had errors that were higher than corrects. And even though the second day looks better, we knew it wasn't a representative sample of this learner. So we're like, we need to make it easier for her. So we went to starting points that were the same within that day, and then it changed, then the starting point changed the next day that we saw her, and so on and so forth. And so we see a nice increasing acceleration across correct, high variability, because we're getting that within practice or within session acceleration. But towards the end of the 4th week, she was making frequencies that were at or above the frequency aim. And again, knowing this learner, we thought we could push her. So we went back to the random phase because that's the phase needed for mastery. And we see the ugliest snowplow I've ever seen. We see corrects decreasing, errors skyrocketing. And we quickly stopped, went back to the condition that worked for her, and realized we needed a higher criterion to progress to the next phase for her. So take-home point number 2 is make sure that your criterion to progress, not even like to finish a program, but to even move between interventions is appropriate. So when you're looking at dirty data, that's a good question to ask yourself. Should I have moved on when I did? We were creating a time program, first teaching the kids to, point and say the quarter times, and then they progress through the curriculum or the slices, and finally it gets to the point where the instructor with a dry erase marker is writing the hour and then the minute. The learner says 12:15, the instructor erases it, and then writes a new time. But the learner was sitting there waiting for us. And if the learner is sitting there waiting for you, you got something wrong. So we moved to a different stimulus, and we used a clock that has hands, and the instructor can manipulate the hands, and we were able to increase frequencies. And while this chart isn't mind-blowing in this huge jump up in level, but we were able, you just knew when the learner is sitting there going, are you done yet? Right? That it wasn't a good thing. So my take-home point number 3 is, when you're looking at data, dirty data, consider, are you having any sort of imposed behavioral ceilings that is suppressing frequency? Can you free up this operand more? LH. So I don't know about you guys, but a lot of the practitioners that I've talked with, there's always one kid who you are not your best with. And that was LH with me. Usually I'm a positive, reinforcing, energetic instructor, and I did not show up in that way with this learner. He was a tough one for me. And here he's just saying consonant sounds and blends. Yeah, I had to actually take myself off of his case because I was not a good fit. But we see a flat acceleration across corrects and really across errors too. When he's making these consonant blend sounds. So that's not the learning picture we wanted. So then we made it easier for him and went to that, start at the same spot and get some within session acceleration. Well, that was not the good decision for him, as you see frequencies across corrects decreasing. Come to find out, this learner hates repetition. And in Dr. Levy's talk, repetition, 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 that is what we do. And so for this learner, not only did we have him do multiple timings of a program because he needed that repetition and practice and contact with reinforcement at higher frequencies, but when we moved it to repetition at the same starting spot, that was even more aversive for him. And so we actually had to go back and do one timing per program throughout his book, and then go through his book multiple times in the session to get that repetition, but put some space and time in between repetition of the same program. So take home point number 4, so when you're looking at dirty data, evaluate competing contingencies. Given our experience with, the random between intervention, which is our go-to number 1, it should have created a much different learning picture. And so when you're looking at the data and there's a decreasing acceleration across corrects and it had the opposite effect that you would assume, you have to look at other variables. And so those are the other variables for LH. Reyes. So this is a little learner who is 4 years old on the spectrum, and he's learning letter sounds. And we started off with vowel sounds. Now, for those of you who know vowel sounds, which hopefully everyone in the room does, they all sound the same, especially to a little learner, right? With ASD. And so also, guess what else we were confronted with? We got some fluent Spanish speakers who are working with this little learner. So it's accepting the but it wasn't it was another sound that I can't reproduce, but it wasn't the E sound. And so we were reinforcing incorrects and counting incorrects as corrects. And so, so we made a phase change and went to topographically and audibly dissimilar letters, and we see a nice change in accuracy. And since this graph has, we see increases in frequencies across his corrects as well. So take home 5 is that you can have multiple issues going on. This was not a good curriculum decision. And we have a training issue with that. Man, I think we just especially, I didn't learn how to read phonetically. I was a sight word reader growing up. And so I had to learn my letter sounds when I went and worked at Cal. And so this is something that is just always ongoing with instructors. JG, he had been in our center for a while, and he had worked with Sam. And Sam is always everyone's favorite because she is tons of fun and hilarious and sarcastic. And so, well, Sam started, moving up in our center and getting more responsibilities and couldn't be with him for every session. And so he was getting a new instructor who was equally as fun and exciting, but she wasn't Sam. And so he actually, and confessed this to me, self-sabotaged his frequencies on the other instructor's days. And he would purposely respond slowly. And so you see high errors and low corrects during those days, which produced a high variability in that condition. Once we increased the density of reinforcement, we went to a K3 schedule, then we saw that tighten up without having to do anything else. So take home point number 6, evaluate reinforcement contingencies. Do you have a reinforcement contingency in place? Are you actually reinforcing what you want to reinforce? Are you actually using a reinforcer? The little girl, after we did that matching to sample task, this was 1 minute after we did that, putting her words on top of each other.
You tell me what words they are. You ready? Go for it.
Act.
She needs some big 6 skills.
At.
They're new cards, they're sticky.
Come.
Good.
Up.
Mm-hmm.
Not.
But the point is, not fluent, not impressive, but she couldn't read them, where 2 minutes before it was 0%. She had no idea what those words were. And I just quickly wrote them down because we had a teacher conference that day, and she's like, oh no, she's fluent with sight words. I'm like, because my assessment says 10% correct. And so I always keep flashcards and a Sharpie in my bag. And so that was a quick and dirty, that's why I whipped out my camera, because I was like, I will show you. So take home point number 7 is just do something. Just try something. Because, so my husband, when we were in Florida, before he was a stay-at-home dad, was our lead trainer, and he would train all the new instructors on working with children. He's huge on rapport. And so his thing, and the just do something is from him. That's his saying. We have just common run-of-the-mill interventions that we have printed out and put in all of our kids' books that tell what it is, when to use it, how to use it, and when to fade it out. So that way our instructors are equipped with, like, they are empowered to make an intervention right then and there when they see some dirty data. And then they can go back when they have their meeting with their care manager or case manager or case advisor, and they're like, well, this program is not, it's got hires, or it's got a worsening push, or it's not looking good, we got a flat line here. And the case manager goes, well, what did you do? What do you mean, what did I do? I didn't do anything. Well, all that time was wasted. You knew it wasn't working. Try something else. It's not going to make it worse, right? If it's not working and then you try something and it's still not working, at least you have more information about, yeah, well, I tried this and that wasn't the right intervention. And so now it saves the learner time. So when you come to your case advisor or something, say, well, I tried right in between and we saw that D cell, so that's not working. Let's sit and think about this together for a more appropriate intervention. So clinically, reaching for charts to solve answers. Personally, the first time I did that was with my daughter, Milyko. At her 21-month visit to the pediatrician, who wasn't like, there's like all these pediatricians in the office, and I hopped to, actually it was a physician's assistant, and it was just a well check. And so Milyko at the time had 13 vocal words and had 3 signs. And the range was supposed to be 15 to 20 for that age. And so I'm thinking, well, she's in there, and I was concerned that she was on the lower end of the range, but she's in there. Physician's assistant says, oh no, we don't count signs, and I'm going to recommend for a speech eval. So having gone through this with my middle child, who was not close to the range, and having him go through 2 years of therapy, I was like, oh no. And this is how I felt. And then I did a little bit of this. And then I took action, because I was so pissed. And like, she had to look it up online. She didn't even know what the range was. She's like, I don't know, let's look online. Like, and I was like, you're obviously not a professional. So I made a list on the back of a chart about the words that she knew every week. And there's more to this. Luckily, I lost the chart because I didn't need a chart anymore, because she was making, she was making beautiful gains and exceeding the range that we needed for her to be within like normal range. She was actually continued on with this trajectory until I lost the chart right around here. And the cool thing is that Kelly Ferris was also charting her son's data. And we are in a behavioral mommies Facebook group, and stumbled upon, we're doing this at the same time, and look, they're producing similar trajectories. And so Kelly is my exemplar. Kelly is my idol when it comes, well, for many things, first of all. I felt embarrassed last night when I confessed to her that my daughter wanted to be Chucky for Halloween. But she's a model in all areas, but especially with reaching for a chart when she needs to figure something out. I mean, she was doing it. I remember her about oh, I had a negative comment. I need to put that on my charts. Negative comment. I kind of pride myself on those sometimes. But this is her son. And this is her son, who was born a little early, and he started taking steps, and she wanted to see if he was going to, this was a developmentally, appropriate acquisition of the behavior. And so you see here in the first panel that we see a beautiful acceleration of Simon's steps. And then here, we saw accelerations of Simon walking with holding objects in his hands, which is a little bit more sophisticated. So this is a gorgeous discovery chart in the sense that she wanted to chart to monitor a potential problem. Another amazing behavior analyst for me who reaches for the chart when she has issues is Tiffany. Tiffany's sweet little daughter is so stinking smart. So when my daughter had 13 words, her daughter, who's a month younger, had 100. But she likes to bite her friends. and was, with preschools, you bite friends, sometimes you get kicked out. So I went in and did some observations because I'm not super familiar with her daughter, and was able, there was a lot of inconsistencies, which turned out to be a teacher engagement issue, which we now are changing locations and we're non-observed right now, right?
1 week strong.
Woo! So my message to all of you, and all that includes me, is to be like Kelly. Be like Tiffany. You have an issue, client, personal, your own children, your spouse, your partner, grab a chart. Reach for the chart for discovery, not just confirmation. A lot of what we show are things that we know are likely going to work. I had this intervention and it worked 12 times, and now we tried it with redheaded kids, and look, it works too. And that's great, and we need to do that because we need to make that significant impact to education. But we also need to tinker. So the message to me as well is just try to bring it up, right? Put something down. Commit to measuring something in one way, such as, fine, when I wake up and go to the bathroom and then I come back to sleep, I'm not going to count that as an error. So I need to come up with a definition, because then I can look at the data, and after a period of time, I can see if that definition is working for me or not. And the data are going to tell me if I need to make a change, and how I'm measuring, or how I'm interpreting things, or how I'm defining the behavior. So sit with the barriers, learn from them, and grow from them. In IPTC here, and I want to say it was 2013, Michael Caprizio was a keynote, and he was talking about how the supervisors need to tinker. And so a lot of people in this room are supervisors, or they're trusted by many supervisors. And so I'm encouraging you all to tinker and create discovery charts. This is one of my tinkering charts. I've got some feeding kids recently, and feeding's a bit outside of my scope, but I am consulting with the feeding specialist, who is not a charter. She's a behavior analyst though. And so we were talking about not so much how to chart things, but her interventions that she's doing. And there's a lot of stuff going on this chart. But the first phase is the learner is learning yogurt, and her feeding intervention is just touch the yogurt to her lips, count a little, If she contacts the yogurt with her tongue, then that's a success. Well, she was doing great with that, and that's a gorgeous learning picture in the first panel. And then we upped the requirements, and we went to she has to take a bite. And that wasn't looking good. And then another barriers that we confronted with was that yogurt wasn't always available. And so we had to do, and she's in an impoverished home, and so requiring that mom keeps this food on hand at all times was a barrier. Mom also, there was 3 foods in this kid's diet, and so mom was really concerned about food varieties, so we incorporated multiple foods in there. So there goes my lack of control, and I'm freaking out because I'm like, but I have grapes and pretzels in the same feeding thing. And so, but the data are there and they're dirty. And now, let's see, the end of the chart is May, what are we, October? Girlfriend is eating lunch. She's eating a meal, she's eating sandwiches and chicken nuggets, and she will try, I give her a new food every week, and she may go, and then I'm like, you take a bite, then you get your whatever good food that's on her plate, and she goes, okay, and then she takes a bite. We don't have the hitting, we don't have the elopement, we don't have the spitting out that once occurred when we were over here. And sorry, the lighting on this is terrible, but I took a picture of it last night. There is a thesis student in Pat Gezzi's lab at UNR who's looking at breastfeeding. And does the infant have a preference to one breast or another? And like she had her chart, her graph and a non-chart, and so I wanted to put it on the chart. And I can't tell anything about these data, but like the cool thing is that she's looking at something, right? Like there's so many issues that could arise. It's like, does one breast produce more milk than the other? Do you have like, and sorry, I'm just gonna go there, but you know, your nipple is like this with output, not like this. And so one of these guys can go, whee, like the shower head, right? And hit the kid in the eye. It happens. And so is that like punishing event or, right? And so like, did the infant just nurse on this and now this one's overflowing, so the minute it latches on, it's like the Nile River, right? There's so many issues that can come to play with her study, but damn it to hell, she's a behavior analyst looking at breastfeeding, right? That's point number one. So you should tinker. You should drop a dot, because if you don't drop a dot, then you're not going to be able to figure out what comes next. Daly won't be able to figure out about these like complexities of breastfeeding. And when we talk about breastfeeding, we're always motioning like that. Is that like if she didn't start somewhere, and if we don't start somewhere, then we're not going to make the impact that all of us are committed to making. So drop a dot, give yourself a peace of mind. I actually just started sleeping better when I started doing my phone app, which is nothing, and it's not dropping a dot. But it's a step in the direction that I needed to make. Our community will grow, our society will grow, we'll have world peace.